The warehouse smells of olive oil and sweat and fear. The year is approximately 146 years before the Common Era, 3 weeks after the fall of Corinth, and the woman standing in the processing chamber was, until 23 days ago, the wife of a Greek aristocrat whose family had governed this city for 6 generations. Her name is Cleomache. She is 31 years old. She speaks 4 languages, can quote Homer from memory, has managed a household of 40 servants, has negotiated trade agreements on her husband's behalf, has raised 3 children who are now somewhere in this same warehouse complex, separated from her during the initial sorting that followed the city's capture. She does not know where her children are. She has not seen them since the 2nd day after the walls fell. She does not know if they are alive. What she knows is that she is standing naked in a room with 11 other women, all of them from families that once commanded respect throughout the Greek world. All of them now, property of a Roman slave dealer named Gaius Varius Flaccus. All of them being prepared for an auction that will take place in 3 days in the forum of what was once their city. She can feel the cold of the stone floor beneath her bare feet, can feel the eyes of the dealer's assistants as they move among the women with measuring ropes and wax tablets, documenting height and weight and the specific dimensions that Roman buyers will want to know. She can smell the oil that has been rubbed into her skin to make it shine under the auction torches, can taste the bitter residue of the purgative she was forced to drink this morning to empty her bowels before the physical examination that will happen within the hour. She can see the implements arranged on the wooden table against the far wall, razors and pumice stones, cosmetic pots containing substances she does not recognize, thin metal instruments whose purposes she can guess but does not want to confirm, chains and collars in various sizes waiting to be fitted to necks that once wore gold and jewels. The man who owns her now, the dealer Varius Flaccus, enters the room and surveys his merchandise with the professional eye of someone who has processed thousands of human beings through facilities exactly like this one. He has been in the slave trade for 27 years. He has purchased captives from a dozen conquered peoples. He knows exactly what Roman buyers want, exactly how to prepare merchandise to maximize sale prices, exactly what techniques transform resistant noblewomen into compliant products suitable for the most discerning households. He looks at Cleomache with an appraising gaze that makes her feel less than the furniture in her former home. At least, furniture was valued for what it was, while she is being valued only for what she can be made to become. "This one," he says to his chief assistant, gesturing toward her. "She still has her pride. I can see it in how she stands. 3 days is enough time to address that. Begin with the standard protocol. If she remains difficult, we will move to the advanced techniques." What happens to Cleomache over the next 3 days, and what happened to tens of thousands of women like her across centuries of Roman conquest, is what tonight's video will reveal. This is not the Rome of marble temples and philosophical debates. This is the Rome of the slave markets, where human beings were processed like commodities, where captured noblewomen were systematically broken before being sold, where techniques refined over generations transformed the proudest women of conquered nations into merchandise that Roman buyers would find acceptable. This is what the slave dealers did. This is what the historical sources document. This is what you were never taught. What you are about to learn has been sanitized out of most educational accounts of Roman civilization, because the reality contradicts the image of Rome as a foundation of Western culture and values. You know about Roman slavery in the abstract. You have heard that Romans kept slaves, that slavery was common in the ancient world, that the economy of the Roman Republic and Empire depended on enslaved labor. You may have encountered the more dramatic aspects of Roman slavery in popular culture: gladiators, fighting in arenas, slaves rowing in galleys, the famous rebellion of Spartacus. But you have never learned what actually happened to the people who became Roman slaves. You have never heard about the processing facilities where captured populations were sorted, evaluated, and prepared for sale. You have never encountered the detailed accounts that Roman writers left of how slave dealers operated, how they selected and processed their merchandise, how they transformed free people into commodities through systematic techniques designed to break resistance and create compliance. Tonight you will discover what the Roman sources themselves reveal about the slave trade that enriched Rome for centuries. You will learn about the mangones, the professional slave dealers who purchased captives from military commanders and processed them for retail sale. You will learn about the specific techniques these dealers used to prepare noblewomen for auction techniques, documented in Roman legal texts, mentioned in Roman literature, described in sources that scholars have known about for centuries, but that popular education continues to ignore. You will learn about Cleomache of Corinth, who was 31 years old when her city fell, and who spent 3 days in processing before being sold to a household in Rome. About Berenice of Carthage, who was the daughter of a senator in that city, and who was separated from her children during the destruction that followed the Third Punic War. About Theodora of Macedon, who was a priestess before her capture, and who was specifically targeted for preparation techniques designed to destroy her religious identity. About Arsinoe of Pontus, who attempted to resist the processing and discovered what the dealers did to women who did not cooperate. You will learn these things from Roman sources, from legal texts that regulated the slave trade, from literary works that described it, from archaeological evidence that confirms it. The Romans documented what they did because they did not consider it shameful. They wrote about slave processing the way they wrote about agriculture or manufacturing as a business practice, with established methods and professional standards. Subscribe if you want to understand what Roman civilization actually looked like for the millions of people who were processed through its slave markets. Comment below, telling me where in the world you are watching from. Because Cleomache is standing in that processing facility in Corinth, and Varius Flaccus has just ordered his assistants to begin the standard protocol, and I am going to tell you exactly what that protocol involved, what the dealers did, what the women experienced, and what the evidence reveals about practices that transformed free people into property. But first, I need to explain how these women came to be in the dealers' hands at all. Roman military conquest followed patterns that remained consistent across centuries of expansion. When a city fell, whether through assault, siege, or surrender under unfavorable terms, the population became property of the Roman state, to be disposed of according to the commander's judgment and the Senate's instructions. The disposition typically followed a predictable sequence. Military-age men were often killed or enslaved for labor-intensive work in mines, quarries, and agricultural operations. Children were separated from parents and processed as a distinct category of merchandise. And women, particularly women of noble or wealthy families, were identified, sorted, and transferred to professional slave dealers who specialized in preparing high-value human merchandise for sale. The identification of noblewomen happened quickly, usually within hours of a city's fall. Roman officers had standing instructions to secure valuable captives before the general looting could disperse or damage them. Soldiers who captured noblewomen could expect bounties that exceeded what ordinary captives would bring, creating incentive for rapid identification and protection of high-value merchandise. The criteria for identification were straightforward. Clothing and jewelry indicated wealth, soft hands and unmarked skin indicated freedom from manual labor, bearing and speech patterns indicated education, household staff, who could be interrogated, indicated social position. Within hours of capture, Roman officers could sort a city's female population into categories corresponding to expected sale prices. Cleomache was identified during the sack of Corinth by her clothing fine wool, dyed with expensive Tyrian purple, and by the gold jewelry she was wearing when soldiers broke into her home. She was seized along with her 3 children and approximately 40 servants, all of whom were held together initially before being sorted by category and transferred to different dealers based on their expected market value. The dealer Gaius Varius Flaccus purchased Cleomache and 11 other noblewomen from the military authorities approximately 6 days after Corinth's fall. The purchase price is not recorded, but similar transactions from this period suggest he paid between 2,000 and 5,000 denarii per woman, a substantial investment that he expected to recover several times over through careful preparation and skilled marketing. The women were transported from the military holding facility to Varius Flaccus's processing warehouse in a covered cart that prevented them from seeing where they were going and prevented anyone outside from seeing them. This concealment was standard practice. Dealers protected their merchandise from environmental damage, sun, rain, the eyes of competitors who might try to assess the quality of new stock, and from the psychological impact of witnessing the destruction of their former cities. By the time Cleomacha arrived at the processing facility, she had not seen sunlight for approximately 14 hours. She had not eaten for approximately 20 hours. She had not seen her children for approximately 72 hours, and she had no idea what was about to happen to her. Roman slave dealers operated facilities that combined the functions of warehouse, workshop, and preparation center. The archaeological evidence from sites like Delos, the major slave trading center of the late Republic, reveals complexes containing holding cells, bathing facilities, examination rooms, and display areas arranged in sequences that suggest systematic processing of human merchandise. The facility where Cleomache was processed was typical of its kind. The holding area consisted of cells approximately 8 feet by 8 feet, each designed to contain 2 to 4 captives, depending on their category and value. High-value noblewomen were typically held in smaller groups to minimize conflict and injury that might reduce their market price. The bathing facilities included both cold and heated pools, with adjacent rooms for oil application, hair removal, and cosmetic treatment. These facilities were not luxury accommodations. They were processing stations where human beings were cleaned, groomed, and prepared according to standardized procedures designed to present merchandise in optimal condition. The examination rooms were equipped for thorough physical assessment. Measuring instruments documented height, weight, and proportions. Medical implements allowed dealers to assess internal health in ways that the Roman legal sources describe with clinical precision. Light sources were positioned to reveal skin conditions, scars, or other defects that might affect value. The display areas were designed to present merchandise to potential buyers. Rotating platforms allowed inspection from all angles. Chains and restraints positioned bodies in standard poses that buyers expected. Lighting was arranged to highlight favorable features and minimize unfavorable ones. Varius Flaccus's facility in Corinth was a temporary installation. The conquest had created a sudden surplus of high-value captives that exceeded the capacity of permanent facilities in the region. But even this temporary facility followed the established patterns, because the techniques that worked in permanent markets worked equally well in conquest situations. Cleomache entered this facility on the 14th day after her capture. She would remain in processing for 3 days before being moved to the display area for auction. What happened during those 3 days followed protocols that Varius Flaccus had refined across 27 years in the trade. The first stage of processing was assessment, a thorough evaluation of each captive's physical condition, psychological state, and market potential. This assessment determined which preparation techniques would be applied and how the merchandise would be positioned for sale. For Cleomache, the assessment began within hours of her arrival at the facility. She was brought to an examination room where she was required to remove whatever clothing she still wore in her case. a simple tunic that had replaced her finer garments during transport. The requirement to stand naked before strangers, male assistants who showed no reaction to her nudity except professional evaluation, was itself part of the assessment, revealing how captives responded to the loss of physical privacy that their former status had protected. The physical examination that followed was comprehensive. Her height was measured and recorded. Her weight was estimated by experienced handlers who had learned to judge mass by observation. Her proportions were documented: the relationship of limb length to torso, the measurements of waist and hip and bust, the specific dimensions that Roman buyers used to evaluate merchandise. Her skin was examined for scars, birthmarks, blemishes, or signs of disease. Her hair was evaluated for thickness, length, and condition. Her teeth were inspected for decay or damage. Her hands were examined for calluses or other evidence of manual labor. Their softness confirmed her status as a noblewoman who had never worked with her hands. The examination then became more invasive. Medical procedures assessed her internal health and her physical history in ways that the Roman legal texts describe as standard practice for high-value merchandise. A dealer who sold a woman without disclosing relevant physical conditions could face legal liability, so thorough examination was both good business practice and legal protection. The Roman jurist Ulpian, writing approximately 3 centuries after Cleomach's time, describes the information that dealers were legally required to disclose. The seller must declare if the slave is diseased, defective, a runaway, or liable to punishment. The same applies to female slaves. If she has physical conditions affecting her capacity for service, the buyer must be informed. The clinical language of legal texts like this conceals the human experience of being examined like livestock by strangers who cared only about your market value. Cleomach stood through this examination in silence, her face showing nothing of what she felt, her body responding to the handler's directions with the minimum compliance necessary to avoid being forced. The psychological assessment happened simultaneously with the physical examination. How did the captive respond to commands? Did she comply immediately or hesitate? Did she show fear, anger, resignation, or resistance? Did she attempt to cover herself? Or had she already accepted that her body was no longer her own to protect? The assessment notes for Cleomach, as reconstructed from similar documented cases, would have read something like, female, approximately 30 years, Greek, formerly of noble status. Physical condition, excellent, no visible defects, good proportions, evidence of previous children. Psychological condition, resistant but controlled, shows pride in bearing, likely to require intensive preparation before market presentation. The phrase, likely to require intensive preparation, was significant. It determined which protocols would be applied over the following days. The second stage of processing was physical preparation, transforming the captive's appearance to meet Roman market expectations. This preparation varied by category and expected sale position, but for noblewomen destined for household service in wealthy Roman homes, the standards were specific and demanding. For Cleomach, physical preparation began on the morning of her second day in the facility. The first procedure was bathing, thorough cleaning, using water, oils, and abrasive substances designed to remove not just dirt, but any residue of her former life. The symbolism was deliberate. The woman who emerged from the bathing process was supposed to be clean in ways that went beyond the physical stripped of the contamination of her previous identity, prepared to receive whatever identity her new owner would assign. The bathing was not gentle. Assistants scrubbed her skin with cloths and pumice, removing dead cells and creating a surface that would absorb the oils and cosmetics that followed. They washed her hair with solutions that stripped natural oils before applying treatments that would make it shine. They cleaned every part of her body, with a thoroughness that left no area private or protected. The hair removal followed. Roman aesthetic preferences favored minimal body hair on female slaves, particularly those destined for household display. The removal process used razors, pumice, and resinous substances that pulled hair out by the roots, a painful process that the Roman poet Ovid describes in terms that suggest the experience was unpleasant, even for free women who chose it voluntarily. For captives who did not choose it, the hair removal served additional purposes beyond aesthetics. It was a physical assertion of the dealer's control over the captive's body, a demonstration that what had been private was now subject to commercial requirements. The pain was part of the message. Your body belongs to whoever owns you, and they will modify it according to their preferences without regard for your comfort. The cosmetic preparation followed. Oil was rubbed into the skin to make it shine under display lighting. Substances were applied to the face to enhance complexion